So on your desk, you're going to see a folder, or on your table, you're going to see a folder. Students are going to be in tables of 4 to 6 students with a folder and the worksheet that's in front of you with there. Don't open the folder. That's going to be for our project later, or our activity later in the class. So just leave those alone for now. So what we're going to talk about today is the question that I have on the screen, which is how can primary sources help us to understand novels from a different time period? Now, what can you learn about this picture just from looking at it? Do you have any information about this picture that might help you? Any questions that you could maybe ask about this picture? So what we're going to look at is how we can inform this picture to then give us some more information back to us. Does anybody know who this person is or know what he might be doing?
Charles Lindbergh?
It is indeed the Flying Ace. And do you know what that is behind him? Can you read the name?
The Spirit of St. Louis?
Yes, that is indeed the Spirit of St. Louis. What is the Spirit of St. That? Do you know what that?
What type of plane it is?
You don't need to tell me what kind of plane. Do you know what kind of plane it is?
That would be interesting.
I was just about to tell you what kind of plane it is, because the name of this, the title of this picture is actually Charles Lindbergh in front of his Ryan NYP Spirit of St. Louis. So I don't know what a Ryan NYP is, but that's the type of plane Charles Lindbergh flew. And he's actually in St. Louis, Missouri. So why would somebody take a picture of Charles Lindbergh in front of his plane in St. Louis?
Isn't he going to try to fly across the Atlantic?
This is right before one of his big record-breaking flights. I believe it was across the Atlantic. So that would be a great opportunity to take a picture to remember history. And so we know from this picture it's probably important if you're, posing him in front of his plane in his flight suit that something interesting is going to happen here. So today, what we are going to talk about is the question that I had on the screen. We are going to discuss what constitutes a primary source, and what we can learn about them. We're going to learn about where to find primary sources, like the picture of Mr. Lindbergh, how to evaluate them, and how to cite them. I know we talked about citation in our foundation classes in 9th grade, but we're going to go over a little one because I know from 10th to 9th grade, brains go, and you might not remember exactly how to cite, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what we know about The Great Gatsby so far. I know that you guys are reading that book now, and so we're going to talk a little bit about what we already know about it and what we can use from the book to help us with our searching for primary sources. We're also then going to, you guys are all going to go and you're going to do a little bit of searching yourselves, and you're going to see if you can get some information that might help you with our question. So, what do we look for in our sources? So first thing we're going to look for, what I've already mentioned a few times, but I haven't actually explained what it is a primary source. So a primary source is something that provides first-hand knowledge, data, evidence about a person, event, place, or thing. Newspapers from the time, advertisements from the time, letters, photographs, anything that tells you a story directly from when that story, that person was alive, that story was happening, that event took place. Secondary source, so created after the event by someone who did not experience firsthand or participate in the events and conditions you're researching. For the purposes of a historical project, secondary sources are great, but for this project that we're going to be working on, these discussions that you guys are going to be having tomorrow in your English class, we are going to only be looking at primary sources. And a tertiary source is something that indexes those two together. It's like a textbook or something like that. And that's not always for research. In this case, we're not going to be using secondary or tertiary sources. So I put up some examples, just really quickly. You don't even have to glance at them. There's newspapers. We have a photograph of New York with from the 20s. And then we also have an advertisement for the Hotel Astor. Okay, So when we're evaluating a source, there are certain questions that we should be asking ourselves so that we can see whether this is a primary source directly from the event, directly from a first-person perspective, or if it's something that maybe the author learned about this and talked about it after the fact, or used primary sources in their examination. So, questions we should be asking ourselves. How does this author know what's going on? How is this photographer setting up a scene? Is this advertisement something that's just playing with things the photographer knows come from that time period? Or is this an actual slice of the moment in time? Where does this information come from? Is this a personal experience, an eyewitness account? Is this somebody talking about an event as if they're there, but they're actually not? You have to be careful and really examine those, that. Are the author's conclusions based on a single piece of evidence, or have many sources been taken into account? Are you talking about a single diary entry where it's something that's directly related, or are you, is this source combining many things? Okay. So, what are we going to look for today? I already mentioned that we're going to be talking about the 1920s when the Great Gatsby was set. So where and when specifically do you think we're going to be looking? So we're going to be, where's the Great Gatsby set?
New York.
New York. And so it's in New York, we're talking about Manhattan, talking about the boroughs, but also you're going to be looking for Long Island because West Egg is in Long Island. So, and then also it's in 1922, so if you want to be more specific, it's set at a very specific time, so you can look for sources that are very specific. And we're going to kind of do, so what's going on in 1922, 1920s? Does anybody know a nickname for the 20s? Anybody heard of the
Roaring?
Roaring 20s? So you can guess from that time it's probably
The Jazz Age.
great, the Jazz Age. That is, so we're going to be thinking jazz is probably a big deal. In fact, we'll see that in a minute when we work on our assignment, or when we work on our project. So, a couple of keywords that I already came up with. So, Prohibition. When did Prohibition start? Does anybody know? In 1922, Prohibition had already been around long enough so that you can definitely be starting to look for very specific things. You can start looking for the FBI coming. So just a couple of words that are really good to look while you're searching. Okay. So, oh, sorry. Okay, so first thing that we are going to do, so you guys are all going to open up your folders, and this is what's on the folder. I only had it printed out once. And you are going to be at your table. You are going to take a look at those sources. When you're looking at these two images, and you are going to see whether you can answer some of the questions that I have on the board, which we've already talked about before. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go through and just come up with 2 or 3 things, and then at the end we're going to go around and everybody pick your most exciting discovery from your sources, and we're going to talk about it. So we have about 5 minutes. If anybody looks like they're, just not really focusing, you can walk around. I'm going to be walking around the tables. Okay? So after we discuss, so we've discussed what we saw, and we saw some good things. We saw, again, another pilot. This time it's an aviatrix. As somebody mentioned, it's pretty cool that there was a woman pilot. So we kind of know what's going on. And we also, what do we think about that? So one thing that we're going to be looking at when we're looking for our primary sources to help us with our discussion tomorrow for The Great Gatsby is why these things were created, who they were created for, what the purpose was behind them, and what that means for the society at the time, what their priorities were, and kind kind of what that means for the events that were happening in The Great Gatsby as well. Okay. So on the worksheet on the table, you are going to see that I've laid out for you a couple of, again, what we've been talking about, how to examine a document, how to reflect on a document, and how to relate a document to The Great Gatsby. Now, when I say document, I don't just mean words on a page. I'm also saying an advertisement, a photograph, anything that is a primary source. So, where should you be looking for these documents? Now, does anybody know what an archive is? Not just the archive on your email address, but what a formal archive is. Has anybody heard that term before? So an archive is a collection of historical documents or records providing information about a place, institution, or group of people. So there are a couple of big established archives that you could look at. We're not going to look at them today, but I do want you to know what they are for in the future, because we are going to be doing a longer research project for the Grapes of Wrath next month. So I want you to be keeping in mind where you might be able to find some information. So the New York Public Library has a great archive, the Library of Congress, which we'll be working with today, the National Archives, and then with the Grapes of Wrath, when we talk about that, maybe you want to focus on archives for the places there. Okay, so for this project, we're going to be doing just a brief discussion. Tomorrow you're going to be talking with your teacher and you're going to be talking with your classmates about what you learned from these primary sources and what you got from the primary sources that helped you with understanding The Great Gatsby. So what I want you to do is when you're looking and when you're researching, I want you to pick out those documents that really grab you and really kind of make you think about the time and about what happens in the 20s. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be using the Library of Congress. This is the Library of Congress's front homepage. There are a lot of, as you can see, there are a lot of highlighted collections. You can go through those if you like. You can also search, and as we have the keywords that we mentioned, that we were talking about before, you can also choose what type of document you want, what type of source you're looking for. So as we said, newspapers, photos, prints, and drawings, and advertisements, you can go through and you can check. I would also check periodicals. Periodicals and newspapers, you might see some print news that would be very useful for you. So I just wanted to show you one option about the Library of Congress that I really think is very helpful. So you see how one of my search topics is date 1922? I didn't type that into the box. I didn't type that into the search box. I actually only typed in New York. And then after that, I chose original format, photos, prints, and drawings, which was a choice that I could pick from this wonderful left-hand navigation pane that allows you to choose certain things, much like Amazon does when you can say, I only want sneakers, or I only want women's shoes, things like that. You can go through and you can actually say, I want only results from the 19th century, or I only want things from the 20th century, and then you can say, I only want things from the 20s. And then you can say further, after it's loaded, you can click on it and you can actually say, I want to go to 1922. Now, in my original presentation, this was actually me going through, but since the Library of Congress site is down, this was not, I did something that was a little bit less technical. Okay, so citing your sources. As you can see from those examples that are on your table, I have put a citation below my source. You are going to be doing the same thing using MLA citation. Photographs and advertisements are cited differently than books, so be aware of those differences and make sure you put even though we're all gonna be searching in the Library of Congress, please make sure you put the Library of Congress information in there. Remember, EasyBib is okay, we've gone through that, but you must check your citation against something like the Purdue OWL, which we use frequently in foundations. You should put it on the same page if possible. If not, I should be able to tell which source it goes to. Okay, so I have just taken actually one to show you on the page. Again, this would have been live, but I took it offline so that I didn't have to worry about the Library of Congress being down. So this is below the image, so we scrolled up, and you can see the title, you can see the contributor names, you can see all of the information you need for your citation. So make sure that you use the ones that are in front of you as samples that I've given you, and match your citations to what I've provided for you. Okay. So, what's a primary source?
Is that a commercial document?
Absolutely. Can you give me an example?
When hiring.
Absolutely. Why do we use them?
No? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize this was right.
Because it helps us understand the time period.
Okay. So we use them to understand the time period, and we use them to understand things that happen during that time. So when you go out and you go to do your research right now, I'm going to give you about 15, 20 minutes to do your research. I want you to remember that what you're trying to do when you're looking for your sources is that you're trying to inform yourself about the background of the Great Gatsby. So I want you to look for sources that help you understand that story, help you understand the motivations of the characters. So you guys can all take out your laptops, and anyone who does not have a laptop, you can use the computer banks on the left. They're already all set up for Library of Congress, so you guys can just get right in. Everybody else, I will go back. Everybody else should have the page. Can just go to loc.gov, and you can just get right to the website. Anybody that doesn't have their laptop with them today can just go in, it's already set up. So this will be about 15-20 minutes. The teacher and I are specifically walking around during the lesson to make sure that everybody's paying attention and doing their, and actually going through the searching. Okay. So, now that, to call everyone's attention, I'm going to pass out this exit ticket. So everybody, what I want you to do is just stop your research right now. Just remember that you're going to need them for class tomorrow. So anything that you are still working on, just take note of where you were, and you guys can get back to it at home. Now, I want you guys to take these tickets. So this is going to go one to everyone, and I want you to write down one thing you learned today about primary sources and one thing where you learned that. And I want you to just make note of that. It'll be about, take a couple minutes and then just drop them off with me. And then we are going to close out the day. Okay. So, the question that we were asking ourselves today is, what can primary sources tell us about the novel set in the past? So again, when you are looking at your, when you're talking about tomorrow in class, your sources that you found, make sure that you're remembering to look there. So for tomorrow, again, you need 2 sources with your citations printed out, and you need to have your primary sources worksheet filled out with at least 2 or 3 of those questions answered. Okay?